Like a backstage pass to the world of fly fishing travel, this is Waypoints, the podcast of destination angling. News and events, helpful travel tips, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from some of the most seasoned and experienced names in fishing travel. Waypoints is brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures, the industry's #1 specialty travel company for the very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered for your next fishing adventure. And now, your Waypoints host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
Grand Bahama is the northernmost of the Bahamian Islands, with the west end of the island located only 56 nautical miles east of Palm Beach, Florida. At 530 square miles in size, Grand Bahama is the second largest island in the Bahamas, a picturesque landmass rimmed with resorts, small fishing villages, and tiny cays that offer lasting evidence of the many different people and cultures that have called the island home. In angling circles, Grand Bahama is known for its legendary flats fishery, a destination that first hit the radar in the 1950s when Palm Beach fishing guide Gil Drake Sr. and Field and Stream magazine editor A.J. McLean began visiting and fishing these waters before eventually opening the first saltwater sport fishing lodge on the island, Deepwater Key. Since the late 50s, anglers from around the world have traveled to Grand Bahama in pursuit of trophy bonefish opportunities and some of the largest permit found anywhere in the entire region. I'm joined today by Rob Neher, the owner and founder of Grand Bahama's East End Lodge. Rob's Lodge is one of my absolute favorite operations in the entire Bahamas, and Yellow Dog has been proud to represent East End since Rob's early years. This is an operation that has quickly developed a reputation for first-rate guides and some of the best bone fishing and permit fishing in the Western Hemisphere, a lodge program that over the years seems to get better and better. Rob, welcome to Waypoints, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
It's great to have you here in the studio visiting with us here in Bozeman. So first question, I got to ask you this. When you open a lodge anywhere in the Caribbean, are you pretty much required to read the book, Don't Stop the Carnival?
That's actually a book I've never read, and I've had multiple people ask me, have you ever read that book? And I figured, why bother? So just went ahead and...
You live it already.
Yeah, I live it, and I wrote my own script with doing it. So.
Well, that's a classic story. It's dated, but I think so many things in that book are still applicable to owning and operating a resort in the Caribbean, no doubt. Well, you're a Florida boy, Rob, born and raised down there?
Yes.
And how did you first discover fishing? Was this a childhood thing or something that you kind of discovered later in life?
Oh, absolutely a childhood thing. You know, I grew up in the West Palm Beach area, and my family had always been fishing. And so can remember fishing as a little kid. And I mean, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and then eventually, they let us get on the boat, and stuff like that. And then, kind of broadened it offshore fishing. And then, we really didn't do flats fishing or, game fishing until the 1990s. It was more, except for snook, but yeah, mostly offshore and, what they say, meat fishing, stuff like that. Yeah.
And how did you first find your way to fly fishing?
One of my friends introduced me to it, and we were fishing down in the Keys, and going after that elusive bonefish, and there's reasons probably why. I mean, I don't think there's any aggregate spawning locations in the Keys, but my first bonefish took me 3.5 days to catch, not on fly fish, gear, but a spinning rod. So there's not a lot of opportunity, and so then I started fly fishing in the Keys, and still it's very, very tough to do. I mean, the first shot you got of the day, you're standing on your line. The second shot is somebody in a jet ski goes flying by, and that's it. That's your whole day right there.
Well, how, from that point in your life, did you find your way to the lodge business? I mean, that's a big jump right there. How did you decide to build and open a lodge on a small island in a foreign country? And how did that really all begin for you?
Quick story was, one of my friends said, hey, you want to really catch a bunch of bonefish, have that more opportunity like I was just talking about. And he said, do you want to go to Deepwater Key? And I'm like, sure, which I didn't even know what Deepwater Key was. And I caught 27 bonefish in 2.5 days of fishing on fly. And so I was hooked, flats fishing in the Bahamas. And so then, Deepwater Key Club, which was a great club, it was a little higher price point. I was in my 30s, and so went to a lot of different places throughout the Bahamas. But everything always brought me back to the east end of Grand Bahama Island. I felt that was the best fishery. And in 2007, I was there fishing, and like I said, it has a little bit more expensive price point, very good quality, great guides. But I became friends with one of the head guides, or the head guide, excuse me, Cecil Lethan. And Cecil Lethan and I became friends, and I traveled to Grand Bahama alone, and we would fish on his days off. And then I got this crazy idea, like, wow, great water. The east end is incredible for so many reasons, as far as a fishery and staying out of inclement weather, and always having an optimum tide, to having, very well-known guides, very experienced guides. And me being naive, I said, it can't be that hard what you do on the land. So I just had this idea in 2007 to, start exploring and opening a lodge, maybe more of a fish camp idea at the time, not necessarily what it is today. And so I went to the government, and it took me from 2007 of November to May of 2010 to actually get the Crown land from the government. It's very difficult for a foreigner to do that. But we did have some help, because we were bringing more business into the area, and also hiring more Bahamians and stuff. So that was, a long road, but that's how it started.
Well, you chose to locate the lodge on the east end in the small community of McLeanstown. Tell us about this community.
It's very, very special. So like I just said, when I first started going there in 2000 and probably 6, 7, I was fishing with Cecil, and I figured, the first time I came over, I said, hey, find a place for me to stay. I thought I was going to stay in a little motel. There aren't any motels. He brought me to a stranger's home, this husband and wife with 2 little kids, and this is where I was going to stay for the next 4 nights while I fished for 3 days. And he just left me there. And he goes, I'll be back in a little while. And the wife couldn't have been any nicer to me. The husband just got home from work. The kids got home from school. And I sat there with this family, talked to them, played with the kids. They made dinner. Cecil came back over. We had dinner together. Got up the next day, ate breakfast. Once again, there they are with their smiles and their friendliness. It was great. Went out and had 3 great days of fishing, and I was kind of hooked on that. I was like, wow. And then also going through the settlement and meeting other people and stuff. And I mean, they're just really wonderful, caring people. And they always, the thing that impressed me the most was they always want to make sure you are having a nice time. Are you enjoying your stay here? How are things? Is there anything we can do for you? And that just really, really got me. I mean, of course, the fishing was good. Cecil, the guiding was great. But the people, I fell in love with the people.
And they call it the conch cracking capital of the world. Is that a well-earned title? Is that legitimate?
That is legitimate. I mean, we have one of the best conch fisheries in the world there. And in 1972, a school teacher in McLeanstown, an Englishman actually, he wanted to raise money for the school because all these little settlements, remember, this is a settlement of about 160 people, 60 miles from the major city of Freeport, which is 55,000 people. So they don't get quite the attention or the budget that, the other schools, get, unfortunately. So this gentleman, the school teacher, he went ahead and he had a conch cracking festival every Discovery Day Monday. And they have these big contests, bands, everything. It's a lot of fun. Thousands of people come from, in the Freeport area and celebrate, and they raise money for the school. So that's how it got that name for that.
And that's a big event that it's turned into.
Very big event.
And what's the date on that?
It's whatever Discovery Day, or sometimes we say Columbus Day, but it's Discovery Day Monday. So usually the 2nd October in Monday, I believe.
Well, there you go. So if you're planning a trip, October, that's a good time to be there for sure. Well, Rob, when you decided to open East End Lodge, it was literally in the shadow of one of the most famous established bone fishing lodges in the world that we've been talking about here, Deepwater Key. Some people might have thought you were crazy. I mean, here's this world famous destination that at that point they had been in business for 50 plus years. They had great guides. It's a lodge that is literally across the cut from where you built your lodge. You decide you're going to open an operation to, in some ways, compete with this, which people probably looked at you and said, well, how's this going to work? But you just alluded to this a minute ago. You had a secret weapon from the get-go that really made you kind of instantly legitimate with your fishing and with your offerings, and that was your partner and head guide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, obviously, Cecil and I have a very special relationship. He's an incredible guy, but he's a wonderful person, a great father, a great husband as well. And he's also a leader of the community. So this wasn't about, hey, how can a foreigner come in, make a bunch of money, bring in a bunch of foreign employees, stuff like that. The lodge was built on, we want to give everybody a world-class bone fishing experience at an affordable rate. And to this day, the lodge, even though we've expanded and we've done other things, we have the best price point, apples to apples, of any lodge. And I don't have to do that. We choose to do that. So we want to give everybody good value for their money, because it is still expensive to do, a big trip like this.
But from the day you opened, from the first clients you had in there, you started with incredibly legitimate guides, which is something that I think you've built the reputation of the lodge on from the very beginning.
Yes. I mean, it's, but it's a culmination of everything. And, the guides are important, but if the fishery wasn't good, then what good is that? So we got a good fishery, to start. We've got really good guides, great guides, I would have to say. But then we also have a land staff. I have the same land staff that I started with in 2009, still work at the lodge. Nobody's ever been terminated. We don't hire any foreigners. It's all Bahamian workers. They love their jobs. People approach me all the time and say, hey, how can I get a job with you? I'm like, if there's ever an opening, we'll let you know, but there aren't any.
Nobody leaves.
Nobody leaves.
Well, let's talk a little bit more specifically about your fishery and what makes the east end of Grand Bahama unique. So you guys are close to the 5 bites that cut through the eastern horn of the island. And this multi-bite fishery really kind of enables your guides to fish, as you mentioned a moment ago, optimal tides throughout the day. They can keep clients on fish and in action regardless of what the tides are doing throughout the course of the day or throughout the course of a month, regardless of when they're there. Also, protection from the elements, from wind, when you get adverse weather. It's a pretty unique fishery.
It's an extremely unique fishery. So first of all, we have 5 bites or 5 channels that go through just about 7 or 8 miles, that horn, as you called it, that last part of the island. So it's very close together. The lodge, we obviously we're on radio, so we can't, visually show it, but the lodge is on the south side right before the horn begins. When we have a high tide at the lodge, we can go through that northernmost creek or cut, and the tide is still falling out of the Sea of Abaco. And then we have the interval of everything in between through that 7 or 8 mile horn. And then in the back, and then we have these little back lakes in between some of these little cuts. So we always have an optimum tide. We also have people that call up and say, hey, I don't want to fish during a new moon or full moon, high tide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, why not? I said, we have areas that we don't fish because the bonefish can't get there unless we have a new or full moon. So it's an exceptional fishery. So we don't have to worry about, oh, it's a new moon. Some fisheries you go to, if it's a 12:30 high tide, with a new moon, those fish are going to be back up in the mangrove.
You can't get to them.
You cannot get to them. Yeah. We always have that opportunity. And then the other nice thing about our fishery is we can fish 360 degrees of the wind. That's very important because some days, beautiful sunny day in April, I was fishing during my friend's birthday, and it was blowing 30 miles an hour. It was sunny as could be, so the guide could see. He didn't eliminate the fish, but he's able to mitigate it, the wind, excuse me.
Right.
And he put us on fish, and we caught fish, and we did well.
Yeah, and there are so many destinations in the world of saltwater where, based on their location or the particular area you're fishing, you have a window, right, where, you might be waiting for the push or you might be waiting for a certain tide cycle and all of your action is going to happen in that window. But certainly my experiences on Grand Bahama is you can fish, throughout the course of the day. There's always options. And it also extends, as you said a moment ago, to the different tide cycles. So whether it's a new moon, high tides, whether spring tides, neap tides, you're always kind of in the game.
You're 100% correct, yes.
That's pretty huge. Well, what is it about Grand Bahama? I mean, over the years, it's become pretty well known for massive bonefish. You certainly have the numbers. It's a place to go and have consistent action. But it's definitely established a reputation as having some of the largest bonefish really anywhere in this part of the world. And in fact, for me personally, the largest bonefish of my life to date has come from Grand Bahama. Why do you think the bonefish in this particular area, and especially on that east end and in the bites, are so large?
Well, I can only just speak of what an organization, the Bonefish Tarpon Trust, has discovered over the years. So the Bonefish Tarpon Trust, as you know, is a very well-known nonprofit, and they study bonefish and their spawning habits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they've discovered that the second largest aggregate spawning school, or spawning location, is in relatively close location to the east end of Grand Bahama. So we have a very good year-round bonefish fishery. Plus, we have the migratory fish that come there to spawn. And they usually come there during a newer full moon in the months of March, April, and May, as well as in the fall. So I think that that's one of the reasons why we have so many fish there, and then we have larger fish. Our fish average 4 to 5 pounds, which is much larger than most other places. We do have a lot of double-digit fish caught. They're not easy to catch. They're big for a reason, of course,
Well, let's talk a little bit about the bone fishing specific to Grand Bahama. What do you think are some of the key things that people need to know when they come to Grand Bahama, and especially if they want to target those bigger kind of trophy bonefish? You talked a little bit about the certain windows, the times of the year. Boat fishing versus wade fishing for these big bonefish. What can people expect?
Well, for big bonefish, I would always recommend boat fishing because you can cover more ground. And you also have a much better sight advantage. The guide, especially, because the guide's on a poling platform, and of course you're on the bow of the boat. The advantages of wade fishing would be that both anglers can fish at the same time, but then you lose a lot of sight advantage. And with the bigger fish, you want a lot of sight advantage. Also, during the winter months, you have a much better opportunity to catch larger bonefish because they have much higher body mass. And even though it doesn't get real cold, when the Northeast has a cold front, we get the tailwinds. So our temperatures might get down into the 70s. That's cold for us, or maybe high 60s. So the smaller bonefish don't have enough body mass to get up on those flats, except in the really bright sunny part of the day, where the larger bonefish, they get bigger body mass and they can get up on those flats. So, I would tell everybody, look, you got to put your time in for the big bonefish. Don't just target them, but tell the guide that you want to have a lot of opportunity. It really depends on your experience and your skill level. Everybody says, what's the most important thing I need to do before I come bone fishing? Practice. Well, it's cold outside and it's rainy. I said, that's perfect. Go in your backyard, do local golf course, wherever you can go, even take a lesson, at a local fly shop. Support them as well. We have a lot of people that have only freshwater fish, whether they're, trout, which I happen to catch my first trout, my whole array of trout this week here in Bozeman, which has been fabulous. Thank you very much for that. But practice, practice, practice. That's one of the most important things you can do. Take a lesson, look at YouTube videos. Double hauling's a lot more important. And then also the two most important rules, I think, when you're flats fishing with a guide is rule number 1, trust your guide. Rule number 2, trust your guide. You need to do that. You get guys that say, look, I only want to cast a big fish. Listen to what your guide says. He knows what you want. Tell him what you want. He knows what you want. He's heard it. So
I love that. It's amazing with the dozens and dozens of these episodes that we've done with guides and lodge owners from all over the world. Those are the two common denominators in every conversation is listen to your guide and practice before you come. It never changes, no matter what the destination is. It's so crucial for the traveling angler. Mm-hmm. No doubt. How about the ideal big bonefish setup when it comes to gear? What do you like to see people show up with at the lodge?
I recommend if it's just a normal wind day, like, 5 to 10, maybe even 15 mile an hour winds, an 8-weight rod is perfectly fine. If it's a little windier, 9, and then that's it. We want to keep the bonefish alive. We don't want to fight them forever, so we recommend 16-pound minimum tapered leader. The flies, it's not rocket science. It's just, in our fishery, it's either a gotcha, McVeigh's gotcha, Peterson spawning shrimp, a mantis shrimp. That's it. It's one of those 3 flies. Guys come with a box of $300-$400 worth of flies, and you don't need to do all that. It's pretty simple. And one of our guides, he always says it's not the arrow, it's the Indian. So to use an old
most
term.
of those flies 2 to 6 on average on sizes.
No, we only use number 4.
That's it. Just 4s.
Yeah, just 4s.
Making it simple.
Making it simple, and then small bead chain eyes, large bead chain eyes, and lead eyes for the different, water
different
depths.
sink rates.
Yes.
Super important. You can have the same, let's say, a gotcha pattern in size 4, but they need to have different sink rates for different depths of water.
Yes.
Always important with bonefish.
It's very important for the fly to get to the seabed before the bonefish gets close enough to it, because if it sees it falling, it's just not natural for him.
That's right. Well, one thing that has always in years past been a bit of a secret on Grand Bahama is the incredible permit fishing. And word is pretty much out these days. People are recognizing Grand Bahama as a super legit permit fishery. So I think we can talk about this safely without giving anything away. But why are there so many permit and so many big permit in the waters of Grand Bahama? And we talked about, the aggregate spawning sites for bonefish. Is there a similar thought with the permit there?
We're not 100% sure about the permit. I know the Bonefish Tarpon Trust is now starting to put a little focus on permit as well. What I can tell you is we have a good year-round permit fishery in Grand Bahama, especially in the east end of Grand Bahama. But it seems as the water heats up and we get closer to the summer, we have more and more fish come. This past June, we had the last 2 weeks of the season, we had 6 fish caught each week, and many broke off or lost. I mean, it was incredible this past season, where we saw schools of 100+ fish, none of them under 30 pounds.
I mean, big fish out there.
Big fish, yeah.
Yeah, and when people ask about the permit fishing in the Bahamas, it's always the first place I talk about because, the numbers are there, especially during those certain times of the year. You see bigger numbers, bigger schools, bigger fish, but it's, gotten certainly more consistent over the years. And I don't know if it's because there are more fish coming to the area or if the guides are just keying into it more, the anglers asking for it more, and so there's more focus on the permit fishing.
I think people are asking for it more. I think we've always seen that many fish, and sadly we're closed during the summer months for multiple reasons. But the hotter the better for permit. Most definitely. But the permit's kind of the holy grail of saltwater fly fishing, if you will. And it kind of brings me back to something I said earlier: was what's the most important thing you can do? Practice, practice, practice. Listen to your guide. Permit or elusive, permit or hard. And you need to really, come with your A game. And, there's not a lot of luck involved when you catch a permit.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a newsflash for everybody. They're not any easier on Grand Bahama than they are anywhere else in the world. There's still permit, but there's lots of them and they're big.
We have men that have, and women that have come to the lodge and they're in their 70s or 80s and they've been fishing since they were young kids. And they said they've never caught a permit, on fly in saltwater, of course. And, that's the one thing they want to do. It's definitely a bucket list thing,
For sure. Well, I'm going to give you a question right now, Rob, that every lodge owner hates, okay? But our listeners always want to know this. And if someone is going to come and visit and fish Grand Bahama, what are your favorite times of the year?
Fishing is good year-round. Real quick story, when I first opened the lodge, of course, I get to fish with my friends whenever I want. So we picked the 3rd week in April. The weather was not good. Fishing was good, but sometimes when the weather can, the winds and stuff like that. So I said, all right, let's do 2nd week in May on year number 3. We did that, and literally a little front, and I've never seen this happen before, just when my friends were there, a little front comes over the lodge, and it drizzled for 4 days of fishing. Never rained, just drizzled. And when I took him to the airport on that, the last day, it was, sunny and we didn't fish. So I tell everybody, go when you can go. You're going to make yourself crazy. In January, there's 21 out of 30 days that are just epic. They're great days. And then we get that 1.5 to 2 days where we get the tailwinds from a cold front, cloudy days, stuff like that. So you'll make yourself crazy. But if I got to pick my times, it would be, and I get to pick 2, it would definitely be probably 2nd or 3rd week in October, and then 2nd week in May. And the reason why is I'm a Florida boy, as we had mentioned earlier, and cold to me. Running when we run out in the mornings in March, it's cold. It's in the 60s when we're running in the morning. I got to put a rain jacket on or something like that, or even in the low 70s. That's cold for me. But the fishing is more consistent. So in that October period, we're not worried about big winds. We're not worried about those cold fronts, getting those tailwinds. And I also have a lot of permit opportunity as well. Same thing in May. We're just about done. By 2nd week in May, we can say, okay, we're not going to get any of the tailwinds from the northeast, that go through, and we should be in pretty good shape. But I love June as well, and June and July, we get lots of permit shots.
Lots of permit shots.
Lots.
And big bonefish.
Yeah.
Well, big bonefish, big permit. What else can anglers find in the waters of Grand Bahama, specifically on the east end? Other species that you guys see and catch on a regular basis?
That's a great question. Chico Fernandez, who's a very well-known saltwater guide and angler, he says the best fighting fish pound for pound is a mutton snapper. That's my permit on the fly, a big one, or on the flats, excuse me. I've never caught a really big one. those are incredible to catch, and they fight like crazy. And whenever I tell one of the guests that that's my holy grail fish, they usually within the next 2 days they catch an 8 to 10 pound one, which is a trophy, on a fly on the flats. That's incredible fish. We also have a lot of other fish. We have gray triggerfish that are very elusive, very hard to catch. A lot of fun. Sharks on fly, barracuda on fly, and then we also have houndsfish. Lots of other little reef fish that you have an opportunity to catch. Even mangrove snapper as well.
Oh, good diversity.
Yes.
Yeah, I know everybody goes there and they tend to get tunnel vision on bonefish, maybe a little bit on permit, but there is the diversity there for sure. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about the logistics involved in a trip to Grand Bahama. Talk to us a little bit about traveling to Freeport and to Grand Bahama. What's involved? I mean, it's a pretty quick and easy destination. As we talked about in the beginning, it's about 56 nautical miles from Palm Beach. It's not a hard trip to make, but what are some of the options for people that want to do a trip to Grand Bahama? How are they getting there?
Very easy to get there. So we have daily nonstop service from Miami on American Airlines. So we have people that can actually come from San Francisco or San Diego, fly right to Miami, and then a 26-minute flight from Miami into Freeport, and we're picking them up at the airport, and they're having dinner with us that evening. We also have daily nonstop service out of Fort Lauderdale as well. So.
And then you've got some regional Bahamian flights, yes. Bahamas Air, obviously. You've got some charter flights that can pretty easily be arranged.
And the charter flights are very reasonable. I really recommend that to a lot of people because it just gives them a lot more convenience, a lot more flexibility. Like they'll fly a rarely inexpensive carrier down to Fort Lauderdale, and then we'll help them set up a charter flight. And if it's 4 to 8 guys, it's very, very reasonable. You're not sitting at an airport. You're not going through security. Some guys they'll fish half to 3/4 day, not even shower, with throw them in the Suburbans or run them to the airport, walk through a fence, and then they fly to Fort Lauderdale and they go back home. They love fishing that much, so it makes it easy. Well,
guests arrive into Freeport, regardless of how they're getting there, and then they're met at the airport and they make the trip across the island to the lodge. Talk to us a little bit about this process.
Sure. So we're in an all-inclusive lodge. So we do everything. Our rates include everything from picking you up at the airport, everything in between, meals, guided fishing, housing, daily housekeeping, etc., and then taking you back. So we have newer Suburbans that we pick you up in the airport. It's about a 45-minute ride. If it's earlier in the day, we'll take everybody for a complimentary lunch at a beautiful beach spot, and then we'll take them to the lodge. And then once you get there, we always recommend, put your equipment together. We'll do casting lessons on the dock. Of course, not by me because I'm not capable. One of our guides will come over and we'll do some casting lessons and stuff like that if they'd like. And then, we go in and we have a little cocktail appetizer, hour, and then we have dinner.
Well, throughout, let's say you're there for a week, 5 days, whatever it is. Once you're at the lodge, what does a typical day look like for guests? Run us through that.
Okay, well, the nice thing about being at the lodge is once you're there, you never leave. So you're completely encapsulated. So we don't get up the next morning, put you in a car, trailer the boats or anything like that. We have a floating dock right there. So it's very convenient. So you're going to get up in the morning around, we're in the lodge by 6:30. We got hot coffee for you. We cook to order breakfast, and then we serve breakfast around 7:30. You meet your guide at 8 o'clock, 8:15, and you fish to 4:15 every day. During the evening prior, during the cocktail hour, you fill out a little lunch card, what you'd like, sandwiches, beers, sodas, waters, stuff like that, and then that's going ahead and that's put in your boat for you. And then when you're fishing, there's no prescribed lunch time per se. Guides are more than happy to fish through lunch if you want to, eat on the run, or sometimes, if you're with a group, it's nice to go to little, we have some beautiful, beautiful sandy beach areas with picnic tables and that we've already put out there, and you can just meet there and have a nice lunch.
And good long days on the water.
Good long days on the water, yes. It's 8+ hours on the water. So, and then when you get back to the lodge, there's not a lot of downtime. So you're going to get back to the lodge, it's going to be 4:30. Sometimes guys like to fish, off the dock for a little bit. We might be cleaning some fish from, your catch. If you caught a mutton snapper, of course, bonefish and permit are all catch and release. We don't harvest those. But maybe you caught a snapper. Maybe you even got a conch. If we see a conch, we'll say, hey, would you like to get a conch? We'll take you back to the dock. We'll teach you how to break a conch out of the shell, because you might want to come to the conch cracking festival one year, which we do have guests do that. They plan their trips around that, and they fish a half day, and then they go to the festival, which is a lot of fun. But then, so then you get in there, you take a shower, and then all of a sudden 6 o'clock is cocktail time. We have a cocktail hour with complimentary appetizers, and then we serve dinner. And our dinners are really unique. So we don't we serve traditional Bahamian fare. So we do cracked conch, flash fried lobster tails, fish, Caribbean curry chicken, and Bahamian pork chops, which is our number one most requested recipe. It's an end cut of pork that's been braised for about 5 hours, and everybody just loves that. And of course, always a homemade dessert.
Well, one question we get a lot, Rob, with destinations these days are places that are also applicable for non-anglers. You know, you want to go, you want to have great fishing, but maybe you're going down with a non-fishing spouse or family members. Grand Bahama has a lot of options for this. Talk to us a little bit about some of the non-angling activities that are available on the island.
Sure. You know, just a few days ago, I talked to somebody about exactly that. They want to bring their wife. And it's like, well, what can my wife do when she's there? Well, I said, well, first of all, you're going to be on the boat alone. So maybe she wants to go on the boat with you one day. It's like, oh, really? Yeah, that's fine. She can go on the boat. We have some beautiful beaches in the area. Sometimes people want to just lounge around, we'll take them to the beach. Also, sometimes they just want to stay at the lodge and just take that day off. So they can go on the boat with their spouse one day. They can hang out at the lodge. We can take them to a beautiful little beach, or we can go into town to Freeport, where we have kayak tours, horseback riding, ATV tours. We have shopping there on the island. So there's a lot of things to do. It's kind of funny, though. It seems like the wives end up staying on the boats with their husbands and actually catching more fish, using a spinning rod, of course, catching more fish than their husband and kind of taking over the boat and stuff and having a lot of fun. So,
well, and my favorite these days are the wives that go down and that are the hardcore anglers with the non-fishing husband. We're seeing more of that too, which is great. So many more people coming into the sport, which is awesome. Well, Rob, let's take a 30-second break to hear from one of our sponsors, and we will be right back. This is Jim Klug, host of the WAYPOINTS podcast. Experienced travelers know that gear and equipment selection is everything, especially when you're headed to remote and distant destinations, which is why, for more than 20 years, Fish Pond USA has been setting the standard when it comes to luggage design for the traveling angler, with craftsmanship that incorporates sustainable fabrics and functionality derived from decades of experience traveling and fishing the world. From Fish Pond's submersible waterproof duffels to technical carry-on bags to beautifully designed lifestyle luggage, the bags and packs that carry our gear can make a real difference in how our long days on the water and our nights in far-off places are remembered. When you take the road less traveled, make sure you're traveling with the very best luggage and accessories. Visit fishpondusa.com to learn more. All right, we're back with Rob Neher, owner of East End Lodge on Grand Bahama. We're going to switch gears, and I'm going to ask Rob about what might be one of the worst days of Rob's life, and that is September 1st, 2019. So late summer 19, and Hurricane Dorian slams Grand Bahama and the Abaco Islands. This is an extremely powerful and catastrophic Category 5 storm that would end up being the most intense tropical cyclone on record to ever strike the Bahamas. It would also come to be regarded as the worst natural disaster in the history of the Bahamas. Rob, pretty tough day for you.
Very tough.
Well, Dorian paused for upwards of like 20 hours on the east end of Grand Bahama, and it just pummeled that entire side of the island. It hit the whole island, but the east end got absolutely shellacked. It transformed the entire area into kind of an unworldly state. Very few structures survived. Numerous lives were lost. I mean, this was a big one.
It was.
It has been a long road to recovery since September 2019 when Dorian hit. Many of the community's populations have dwindled on that side of the island as the residents moved away since they kind of lost everything. Today, fast forward to what we've got going on now, what can anglers expect when they come back to the East End and specifically to the McLeanstown area?
Well, we had a lot of regular anglers that used to come to the lodge, and over the years, we've got a lot of familiarity with them and became very close with them. So that part of the island, and including the lodge, we weren't damaged. We were obliterated. We were completely destroyed. I was insured, and I got 100% of my limits on every aspect of the policy. It was a very tough day. It was tough for lots of reasons, and it was for my friends, their homes. 5 people died. One of the guys, he used to guide for us, so it was tough. Yeah.
Well, where were you when the storm hit, Rob? And what was happening at the lodge when you realized that Grand Bahama and specifically the East End were in the crosshairs of Dorian?
Well, I was trying to have my first vacation in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. So I was in Hawaii, and I was in Hawaii sitting next to the pool with a beach towel over my head, looking at my iPad, watching this storm go over Abaco and Marsh Harbor, and then line up perfectly and just symmetrically just go over the east end of Grand Bahama like a buzzsaw. And it was very tough. All communication was lost. One of my fishing guys stayed. I told him not to stay. 2 others stayed as well. I didn't talk to them. And I called him during the eye, and he said it's really bad. And for him to say, he's not a man of many words, but it was really bad. And then we lost communication. And then fast forward after the storm, it took Cecil, my partner, 3 days on a backhoe to get from Freeport, where most everybody went to Freeport. So out of the last 30 miles of the island is considered the east end. It's a special administrative district, or has its own administrative district. And it took Cecil, out of the 800 people, probably 100 people stayed, 31 people died, or they're missing. Nobody's ever been recovered. It took Cecil and everybody 3 days on a backhoe from before sunup to after. And to get back to see, their houses either completely gone. Like some of our guides, their homes, wooden homes, the only thing left was a concrete slab. Everything that they had was gone. Nobody was insured. We had the loss of life, or the missing people, as I said. It was very difficult, very emotional. But, I was away, and the minute I got back, I got the first flight back from Hawaii that I could. I did, the only thing I could think to do was just start buying. I got all my friends together, and we went to Walmart and Costco and just got food and clothing. I called you, and I said, we need help. And you said, absolutely. And you guys helped us a lot too. And you helped with the chartered flights, and it was emotional. Yeah.
How many days after the storm hit before you arrived back on the island? And tell me a little bit about that journey from arriving at the airport to making the crossing to the east side of the island, and some of your first impressions.
Well, after the storm hit, like on a Monday or Tuesday, I got over there the first day they would let flights in. I was on that charter flight. All the seats were taken out, loaded down, me and a pilot, and we had 2,000 pounds of stuff in that plane. They wouldn't let us leave the airport. So 3 out of the first 4 days that we could get in there, I flew flights with all the stuff donated, stuff that you guys donated in your foundation, and then all the other money. We started a GoFundMe page, and we raised a lot of money. And so we went ahead and we bought all the different things that we thought everybody needed in care packages and what have you. We flew all that in there, and then it was probably 2 weeks before I could actually enter the island. And it was, and I think there's a blog on our website. It was apocalyptic. All my vehicles were ruined. Somebody let me borrow a vehicle, and I drove to the east, and everything that was, all the light poles were snapped in half. And this is in the Freeport area. This is 60 miles from where the eye of the storm went, and the eye of the storm didn't even go to Freeport. A lot of Freeport was flooded. Driving out to the east, it was eerie. Everything was brown. There wasn't, and as you know, when you're driving out east, there's palm trees, green this, green that, nothing. And then as I'm going out east, I see everybody's house I know gone. And it was tough.
And then you finally arrive in McLeanstown, unrecognizable.
We couldn't even go on one of the roads. There's 2 little roads in McLeanstown. One of them probably had about 25 to 30 feet of lumber, because what had happened was, I guess, when the storm first started coming through, we had about 3 or 4 feet in the settlement, and then I guess a wave of water came from the north. It was like 20-some feet. So Cecil's house had 10 feet of water in it, and then after it dissipated, he had about 5 inches of mud.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And you get to the lodge, and it is gone.
Flattened.
And at that point, you arrive back on the island, and you're essentially out of business as an operating lodge at that point. Was there a moment where you were ready to just throw in the towel and say, I don't think I can go through the rebuilding process. I'm done?
No.
Not even one moment.
Nope.
Well, we talked about Deepwater Key in the beginning of this episode, and it had been around at that point for like 60 years and pretty much gone, never to reopen as of today.
It is not, yes. Yeah. All their buildings are gone. There's a couple homeowners' homes still there, but everything's been flattened there. And they actually did remove everything during COVID.
But between Deepwater and East End Lodge, you guys were the lifeblood of McLeanstown. You were the economic driver largely for that area. So it was important for you to rebuild the lodge, and you made that commitment early on that you were going to rise again from the ruins.
And that's what we did. I mean, I spoke to Cecil and his wife, and, Cecil's the head guide and my partner, and his wife's the lodge manager. And they came over to the States. We let the dust settle, and I was like, you guys want to do this again? They said, yeah. I said, let's go. So we never wavered from that. The only thing that slowed us down was COVID. Otherwise, we would have been open earlier.
Well, what kind of community resilience have you seen from McLeanstown in the wake of Dorian in the years since 19? Is the community rebounding? Have people returned? If you go this year to the Conch Cracking Festival, is it still the kind of dynamic and energy of old?
No, it's not. And the reason why is 160 people, there's maybe 35 to 40 people there now. And the reason why is nobody was insured. So some people had money saved. They were able to rebuild their homes. Other people, we'd given all our homeowners, not money, but I bought them building supplies from the money we raised. And to help them, not completely, we couldn't, like the two fishing guys that their homes are just gone, we could only get them to a certain point. But then there was a lot of NGOs like Samaritan's Purse and other organizations who were incredible organizations, helped them with roofs and also the Rotary and stuff like that. But, I'm in a grocery store or a little store somewhere and I'll see, like Mrs. Cooper and who used to live in McLeanstown. And I ask her how she's doing. She goes, I'm sad. Why? She goes, I just want to come home. I just want to come home. And she doesn't have the money to do that, and that's, we've been trying to do a lot of different things. First of all, we tried to get the lodge up and running. We did that. And we still had construction workers there until this past June. Just we opened we didn't even have a laundry room. We were using Cecil's house. We got up and running with the first group of people that came in. I said, hey, it was in March 14th of 2021. I was like, hey, don't lean against the wall so the paint's still wet, because it was. And the lodge is completely built back better than ever. But now we need to help the people. There's also the Bonefish Tarpon Trust has started a mangrove restoration project, and they've been doing a lot, and they've gotten up to 29,000 plants, I believe, with their goal to be 100,000 plants. Well, one of our guests came to the lodge this past November, and he's been fishing Deepwater Key and East End Lodge for years and other parts of the Bahamas, and he was so taken by everything. He did a fundraiser for it with the Bonefish Tarpon Trust in Maine in March of this year, and raised over $100,000 for the mangrove restoration project. And now our goal is 1 million plants. But now moving forward, we want to focus on how do we get these people back in their homes, in their settlement. I have 4 employees that drive from Freeport every single day, and they carpool, and they have very long days because they don't, they can't take separate cars, so they carpool, and it's difficult on them. So they need a lot more help, and not just McLeanstown, which obviously that's where I'm at, so that's going to get a lot of my focus, but the entire east end of Grand Bahama. I mean, it's been decimated.
Yeah, and over 2 years ago, and there's still so much work to be done.
There is.
It was pretty amazing at the time and in the immediate aftermath of the storm to see the fly fishing industry and the fly fishing community kind of come together on this. There was an effort launched called Double Haul for Dorian. A lot of people stepped up to help, and specifically to help those in the fly fishing industry that had worked at the lodges, that had guided the staffs that were directly impacted by this. But again, a lot of work to be done. A lot of times when something falls out of the news cycle, you think, okay, now we're on to the next thing. But this is definitely going to be years of recovery.
And it'll never be the same. I not necessarily like the term a new normal, but for the locals, there's going to be a new normal, and it's sad because they're wonderful, nice people. They really are. And it's sad to see people displaced out of their homes.
Well, you mentioned the kind of ecological restoration efforts that are going on the part of BTT, a lot of the mangrove restoration. From an angling perspective, has the fishery come back, in your opinion? Is it the same? Is it not quite the same? Is it better? What are you seeing? What have you seen in the aftermath of Dorian for that East End fishery?
Well, actually, the Bonefish Tarpon Trust has been out to the lodge quite a bit. Post Dorian, but before we reopened the lodge. And I was with them a couple times, and they, looked over the fishery. And, the good news is that a lot of the mangroves have been damaged or are dead, and it's going to take a while for them to grow back. But they weren't moved. No great erosion occurred, or really any erosion. So the mangroves are still where they were before. And the most important thing is that the sea, and by the way, I'm not a scientist, I'm just kind of regurgitating, so forgive me if I get something a little off. But the seabeds and everything and the sea grasses are still intact. And what it's actually done is actually kind of flushed the system out and got rid of a lot of that inorganic material underneath the mangroves. And the fishery is really better than ever. Like I said, we had 6 permit caught each week, 2 weeks in a row. That was landed. We've never had that before. The bone fishing's been great. But, it's funny. So we reopened March 14th, 2021. We had 6 gentlemen come in and fish half day on arrival. We had other people coming that day. And they came back, and nobody had fished the fish in 2 years. And they came back and they said, wow, those fish are spooky. It's like, no, the fish aren't spooky. They're not predators. They've got sharks, barracudas, and big birds.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. So, they're just not jumping in your boat.
They're still bonefish.
Yeah, you gotta be stealthy. If they were easy to catch, you wouldn't, they still caught they come back and catch 8 fish, but they were like, oh my gosh, or broke off some. Yeah. So you deserve each one that you land for sure.
Well, and that's, wherever you go for these particular species, that's the way it is. It's never easy. And you do have to bring your A game, but that's what makes it so much fun and so worthwhile when you do get those special fish to hand.
Sure.
No doubt. Well, when you rebuilt, fully open now, you have made a number of changes and kind of built back better than it was before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So before we were 5 rooms, 10 anglers. And we would run, of course, 5 boats. And what I did was the main lodge building, we don't have any guest rooms in it anymore. We expanded it. We made it larger. We put a larger front porch. We turned the bar facing the water. Yes, I know the bar used to not face the water. We live and learn. And it's just a great common area now. Very comfortable. And then, there's always a lot of demand for single rooms. So we put in 6 single rooms and we have 4 double rooms. So we increased our capacity from 10 anglers to 14, and we've been booked solid all this past season. It's been great. We have a nice retail store that we put back in, and we put a seawall in, had to put a new boat ramp dock. Everything looks really, really good now. It really does. New fire pit. So everything's really, really nice.
And you guys are full speed ahead.
Yes, full speed ahead. And we're really looking for, I usually don't like to open until after Discovery Day Monday unless there's demand. And right now we're opening September 30th. We have so much demand, and we might even be opening earlier.
Well, congratulations. That's a monumental effort in that year and a half to rebuild.
Thank you.
Well, here's another question for you. And Dorian aside, okay, Category 5 hurricane challenges aside, what are the hardest things about running a destination fishing lodge? And I ask you that because, when you have clients at the lodge, you're working hard to make things seamless, smooth, problem-free, and fun at all times. You hope that the client and guest experience, they're only seeing the positives, right? That's, if you're doing your job, that's their takeaway and perception. But behind the scenes, what are the constant challenges and the hardest elements that you as a lodge owner deal with on a regular basis? The things that, the traveling angler and guests don't always think about when they head to a foreign destination.
From an operator standpoint, I feel blessed to have the staff that I have. They get it. People say, they always ask me, is your staff friendly? I'm like, come and see. And they do. They're just blown away by them. I think that the land staff is so minimized by maybe some, like the guides think that, it's all about them. It's not. And, sometimes it's a tough weather day out there and you didn't catch as many fish as you hoped. And the guide, it was just tough. And you come back in and people are smiling, friendly, got, nice food, nice service, so I don't have any problems with staff there. I think the hardest thing is really just getting everybody's, flight itineraries. So because I'm surrounded by so many good people, honestly, getting flight itineraries, that would probably be the hardest thing for me as a lodger. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I've got a good U.S. staff with the bookings, and I've got a great Bahamian staff. So they make it very easy for what I do.
Getting them to the island is a challenge. Once they're there, you got it covered.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, we talked a few minutes ago about the recommendations of telling people the two important things. A, listen to your guide, always trust your guide, and B, practice your casting. Aside from those two obvious ones, which again are applicable to any destination around the world, if you could talk with every single guest that is coming to your lodge, let's say for the first time, and you want to give them some game-changing advice or pre-trip advice, what would you tell them? Obviously the casting, the trusting your guide, but what else can you tell people to have them arrive kind of ready and in the game?
Well, when somebody books a trip with us, we invoice them, but we also send a pre-trip planning guide. And Yellow Dog does the same thing, and they're both very good documents. They should read them. That's going to help them the most because they don't. They have questions about cell phones. It's in the pre-trip planning guide. They have questions about the flights. It's in the pre-trip planning guide. They ask about flies and which ones they should bring. It's in the pre-trip planning guide, as well as recipes if they want to tie their own. We have an extensive list of all the things they should bring. And prescription drugs is important because I can't get those for you, and prescription sunglasses. Anything else I can cobble together and get if you forget. But just take a moment and read your pre-trip planning guide. We've taken a lot of time to put it together, and that's usually the phone call I get is one of those questions. But if there's something that's not on there, then obviously call us. And I love to talk to people on the phone. I don't think they do because I talk too much. But just give me a call. Give Yellow Dog a call, and we'll answer your questions if it's not in that guide. But really, we've spent a lot of time, and from experience, our own personal experience, and then we've learned, from other anglers coming to our lodge. So it's really, you read that, and you practice, and you're willing to be coached and listen to your guide, you're going to have an incredible time.
Amen. Really good advice. Really good advice. Well, let me ask you this, Rob. What does the future look like for East End Lodge? What are you looking forward to in the years ahead?
I'm just looking forward to successful seasons. I've got a great guide staff, got a great land staff. The facility is 100% the way I want it. We can always do a better job, always have a better smile on our faces, I'm sure. We're always, always working towards that. But, we're just looking forward to, giving everybody a great experience on the water. And then more importantly for me is I'm very focused on not only helping the mangrove restoration project, but now that the lodge is all completely done, is to help people get back in their homes. So
nice. Well, I'll tell you, to our listeners, if you're looking for a great saltwater trip for the near future, even if it's for a quick few days, a long weekend, or an extended amount of time, this is a fantastic destination and for sure one of my personal favorites. Rob, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
It's been great talking to you.
Same.
Well, that's it for this latest episode of Waypoints, the podcast that is 100% dedicated to travel and the search for adventure. Be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com to plan and research your next fishing trip and stay up to date on the latest travel news and developments. You can also visit the Waypoints podcast archives for dozens of previous episodes that cover and explore the world of destination angling. Join us for our next episode of Waypoints, and remember, life is short and no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Waypoints is produced by Brian Gregson with music provided by the Steep Canyon Rangers. Visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more destination profiles, travel news, and expert advice, and be sure to join us for our next episode.